Okay, perfect. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Edible Gardening Support Group. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Christina. I will be facilitating the Q&A portions of the meeting today. Next slide, Camille. So before we jump in, let's review some notes related to the functions of Zoom for this meeting. First, this workshop is being recorded so we can keep track of all of the valuable feedback and discussions that happen here today, and so that we can learn and improve the way that we host these workshops in the future. Next, everybody's microphones are muted to minimize background noise and distractions, but we really encourage you all to keep your video on so everybody can see and meet their community members. Please use the chat function to submit your questions. So select chat at the bottom of your Zoom window to type in a message to the whole group. We'll be asking you to use this feature instead of asking questions out loud, and then we'll ask questions on your behalf when we've got the designated Q&A portions. Next slide. So just a little bit more detail about how this will work. If you have clarifying questions related to the presentation content, please click on the chat icon and you'll see this box pop up. Type your questions into this box and I will do my best to ask that question live during the designated Q&A portions. During the group discussion portion of the meeting, you are welcome to participate and share by speaking. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see these icons. If you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself by clicking on this icon to the left of the screen. You can mute yourself again by clicking that same icon when you are done speaking. Next slide. And a quick overview of the meeting structure. We'll start off with an introduction to the county programs by Camille Lang, followed by a group introduction by our main facilitator, Jimenez. And we will administer a quick poll from there. Then Jesus will lead us through two short presentations, What Are People Growing and Common Challenges. Just a reminder here that you are welcome to type in clarifying questions into the chat box during these presentations and we will address those questions live. After this, we will break out into smaller groups for lengthier discussions. And after 45 minutes, we will reconvene for closing comments. And with that, I will hand it off to Camille for county program information.
Let's see. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Christina. My name is Camille Lang. I am the volunteer coordinator with Sustainability Academy, and I just wanted to give you all a quick overview of the different programs that the Office of Sustainability offers. Our office's goal is to build a sustainable community that fulfills the needs of the present and the future. So a few of the programs that we have that are designated specifically towards getting all of you involved in your county is our Home for All program, and that's a program that supports the establishment of diversity of housing options in San Mateo County. Our active transportation program is geared towards getting people out of cars and on the road in an environmentally friendly way. You can contribute to the active transportation plan online on our website. They're updating that to make sure it's more useful for people in San Mateo County. The Climate Ready San Mateo County program is keeping everyone in mind when planning for climate change impacts in San Mateo County. This action plan is also being updated. I highly recommend you go online and contribute to that. Our Green Business program is another one that's geared towards small and medium-sized businesses in San Mateo County, and we provide certification support as well as giving you the marketing tools you need to advertise that your business is sustainable. The next two are about energy. So we have the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, abbreviated as BayREN, and this program is all about saving money at home. So if you are interested in saving money, you can check out the resources BayREN provides to make small changes at home that benefit your wallet and the planet. Peninsula Clean Energy is an alternative to PG&E that helps homes be more clean energy and reduce greenhouse gases. And then finally, our waste reduction programs. We have a few different things that go on in our waste reduction part of our office. There's a sustainability hotline. That's a phone number that you can call for any sustainability questions. The schools program is geared towards making sure that schools have the support they need to have a compost bin, are properly sorting. And we're trying to do that remotely now too, which is awesome. Our community garden project is looking for people in the community that are motivated to bring composting into their neighborhoods and show that as an example in the community garden, as well as our 4Rs grants programs. And there's a grant application process for projects that you are planning that are related to reducing, reusing, recycling, and rot or compost. So a big part of the Office of Sustainability is our Sustainability Academy. So these are the goals of the Sustainability Academy. We provide free education to raise awareness about complex socio-environmental issues, empower residents to take agency in their lives, and build community leadership through experiential education. So you're helping us meet those goals right now. Thank you for being here. Some of the programs that we offer are workshops and field trips. This photo was taken before social distancing protocols were put into place, but the workshops that we're offering are home composting, growing and using herbs, non-toxic cleaning, going solar and panel installation, climate champion series, edible home gardening support community like this workshop here, mending and fixing clinics. And in the past, we've offered field trips, and we're looking to kind of adapt those previous offerings to make them available to you remotely now with the shelter-in-place protocols. At the Maple Street Jail, we work with partner groups. For this project, we actually worked with Planting Justice, and we do holistic wellness workshops inside that jail, and we've designed and planted an edible forest with inmates that aren't pictured here. And like I mentioned before, that was just done in partnership with another group called Planting Justice. Another program that we offer is a class, and this is the Master Composter course. It's 6 weeks long. There's backyard and vermicomposting that's covered, as well as soil biodiversity, solid waste reduction practices, and it ends with student presentations of knowledge and a potluck. This class will be offered in the fall, so you can that registration will be open later this year. All right, and then we also have a Master in Local Sustainability course that you can take. This is a 9-week-long course, and the topics covered are climate change, environmental justice, energy, water systems and watersheds, waste reduction, food systems and farming in San Mateo County, transportation as well. The registration is closed for the class that's starting next Wednesday, but it'll be offered again in the spring, so stay tuned for that. Another part of the Sustainability Academy are our socials. These are open to everyone. You don't have to have participated in a previous workshop or master class. These socials are meant to just get people connected in the community, showing what they're interested in and how they're living sustainably, so that way we're all working as a team to do that. None of these programs would be possible without the Academy team. This is from left to right. I'm going to go top and then bottom. At the top left corner is Ivana Andrade. You can see her in this call. I'm right there in the middle. Jesus Jimenez, who's going to be talking the most today, is over at the top right corner. There is Todd Sutton down below Ivana. Jeannie Fan is teaching a herb gardening workshop. And then the final photo at the bottom left corner is Joe Lees and Jessica Coe, who are crucial to our programs here. If you have questions about anything I mentioned, I highly recommend you check out our website. If you have more interest and you want to have specific questions answered, you can email sustainability@sanmateo or at smcgov.org, and that hotline I mentioned before is right there as well. You can type your questions in the chat, but I highly suggest you go on there as well, because those will give you those more solid answers. All right, so that's all from me. I'm going to turn it back over to Najiha, who's from Fresh Approach. She's going to present a little bit here.
Pull up that slide. Hi, everybody. I'm Najiha. I'm a program specialist at Fresh Approach, and we've partnered with the Office of Sustainability over the past few years. We actually got one of their 4R grants, which is really cool. But just talking about a little bit of our programs, I am the manager of our collective gardening network. So one of our programs that we strive to do is bring healthy food access to the Bay Area and East Palo Alto specifically as well. Really just low-income residents, just giving them a little bit of a resource for them to be able to have access to healthy foods. So our gardening network is one of those programs where we give resources for anything from seeds to seedlings, soil, even growing space, whether they have a backyard at home that we can install a box, or if they don't even have space at home, we find access within local community areas to be able to do community gardens for them to have access to a parcel of land. We also have our East Palo Alto Communities Farmers Market. It's a traditional farmers market. We used to be located at the Ravenswood Family Health Center, and now we're at the Bloom House, which is at the very end of Pulgas in East Palo Alto. Really cool space there. And if you guys want to check us out, we're there every Wednesday from 11 to 2 p.m. What's cool about these markets is that we offer a matching incentive. So if you come, you'll probably get a $10 discount for being there, and you can stretch your dollars a bit more. We also have our nutrition classes called Veggie RX. So we prescribe vegetables and fruits as medicine, and we talk really good discussion about how to be healthy and create healthy lifestyles. And then finally, in conjunction with our farmers markets, we have more mobile farmers markets, which are different little taco trucks that exclusively have healthy foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, rice, and that sort. And we go around different areas in the East Bay and South Bay and San Francisco Bay Area, just bringing healthy food access all over that way. Yeah. And if y'all have any questions, you can reach out to us. You can go to freshapproach.org and you can browse our pages. And if y'all have any questions for me, I'll type in the chat box here my email address. It's najiha@freshapproach.org.
Awesome. Thank you, Najiha. All right. So now we've gotten through it. I think let's turn it over to Jesus here.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first ever edible gardening support group. My name is Jesus Jimenez, but you can all also call me Chuy. I'm one of several facilitators here today, and we're all very excited that you can join our very first meeting. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to all the Office of Sustainability staff, support, and all my friends who are helping to facilitate as well. It means a lot. And obviously thank every one of you here participating today. So I want to start off with a confession, really, that I don't actually consider myself to be a very knowledgeable food gardener. Over the years, I've grown my own food, and it's mostly been easy stuff like salad greens and herbs, tomatoes and whatnot. So that's kind of the extent of my edible gardening. But what I can say is that in that small realm, I've had a lot of success because I do consider myself to be a good observer, which I think is key to successful gardening. So I say all that because I don't want you all to think of me as a teacher. I'm actually hoping to learn a lot here myself today. When you signed up to take today's or to participate in today's support group, you probably noticed more than once that we specified that this is not a workshop or a class. This is a support group, meaning we're all here to share common experiences, questions, concerns, and really, more than anything, provide each other with encouragement, support, and help to feel more comfortable as we all try to grow our own food. So we're holding a space here to share interests, to make connections, to learn to grow food at home collaboratively, without really looking to any one person, myself or any of our facilitators, as the teacher or holder of all the answers or knowledge. We're all here as students and teachers alike. With that being said, I can tell you right now that this support group is not going to be a perfect match for everyone's sort of learning preferences or styles, and that's okay. Just like Camille mentioned, there's the Office of Sustainability and the Academy have tons of resources, different classes on all sorts of edible gardening, composting. You just have to visit the website. There's so much info there. It's all free. It's really, really good stuff. And it will allow anyone who's interested in getting more in-depth information on any one of those topics to really delve deep. So just want to get that out there now. We're not going to get into the super nitty-gritty levels of gardening today, as interesting and awesome as they may be. We're going to keep it very broad, general, sort of support, and just kind of holding this space for everybody to feel free and ask questions at any level. And that's what we do encourage, is questions and participation from everybody, really, because that's how this is all going to work. So few quick notes here before we get going. Most of the actual conversations are going to take place in smaller breakout groups. So for the first 20 or so minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to go over some of the main topics that were responded to in the survey that we sent out to everybody. But once we're in the breakout groups, everyone's going to be able to openly share and participate. During the presentations here in the beginning, we'll be limiting, everybody will be muted, but you can still, and we actually highly encourage participation in the chat rooms, because all of those will be recorded. So if you have any questions, we'll try to address them. Jess is going to help to screen those out, but we won't actually be verbally communicating for the first little bit here. So again, if you have any questions at any point, go ahead and ask, and we'll try to get as many of them answered. So let's see here. We're also going to be setting up in the near future a digital edible gardening library on some sort of file sharing platform. So everybody can share pictures, resources, ideas, or just troubleshoot together. And again, help to build community in this time when we can't personally, physically build community. So we're going digital in that sense, but definitely stay tuned for that. Some other ideas or resources, like Najiha mentioned, there's tons of community gardens, and although that's also very limited right now, once permitted, we all highly encourage that you get connected, check out your local community gardens, because there's a lot of people that are just really happy and willing to share information, provide space and resources to help us all be more successful gardeners. So the last note is to just remember that this is the beginning, and it's our very first support group meeting right now. It's really exciting. And depending on everyone's participation and interest, we have every intention of this being an ongoing support group, where we'll discuss other topics based on people's interests and growing needs at home. But yeah, just kind of stay tuned for that. And also, for anyone who's wanting to look back at the information covered here today, that'll all be available in the next week or two. Everything from the video to the chat and all the questions. So yeah, couple last notes here as far as just the intention of the day. More than anything, again, we're providing more of a space to have and facilitate engaging learning for everybody, right? We want to learn from each other and make connections and have fun. That's pretty much it. So with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into a couple of short, let's call them discussions, presentations, on some of the topics that were most mentioned in the survey that we sent out. So the first one was, what is everybody growing? And what's your kind of growing situation at home? So just remember, the whole chat will be recorded. You can look back through it later. If you have any questions specifically to the discussion I'm kind of covering right now, go ahead and submit them in the chat, and then Jess will help to screen some of the more common ones. But if you have very particular questions having to do with your specific gardening needs, those are better saved for the breakout groups. We'll be a lot more much smaller group, more intimate conversation. So, all right. So first section here, we're going to be talking about what to plant when so I can eat all summer. And that actually was a direct verbatim quote from the survey. Somebody submitted that as their question. They just want to know what to plant exactly when so they could eat all summer. And I think that's wonderful. That's great. And really good question. So we're going to just briefly go over some of the things you want to consider. And again, this is a two-way thing here, even though I'm the only one speaking. If anybody wants to correct anything I'm saying or add to anything I'm saying, please do so in the chat and we'll try to get that out to the group. So what to plant when, a lot of things to consider. Specifically, and to start off, your garden location within your own space. So you want to notice more than anything how much sun or shade it gets, because that's going to tell you first and foremost what is going to thrive there and what's maybe not going to do so well. So it's easy to kind of look out and, you know, see a sunny spot, but it's a lot better if you kind of go back and take notice of it throughout the day. Maybe pick one day where you just go out to where you're planning to have a garden, or maybe you already have a garden and you're having trouble growing successfully or very productive, and just kind of notice every couple of hours how much sun is getting, maybe when any shade blocks it, and even try to log that down so you can have a rough or ballpark figure of like how many hours of sun it's getting. And that'll give you a really good kind of starting point for what you can grow there. So if it's really shady, probably don't want to grow tomatoes or peppers or things that really like the heat. Maybe you're better off growing leafy greens. So that's kind of what I would recommend. And again, anybody else can add their advice in the chat box. But that's what I would recommend as far as like your very first step on what you should be planting. And then once you kind of scale back a little bit more outside of your, you know, your own residence and your own place, it's really helpful to look at some microclimate sort of planting maps. So if you, some of the resources that were sent to everybody in the email give very specific locations, for example, like southern, more hot San Mateo County, northern, closer to San Francisco, cooler, but still sunny areas. It's really, really helpful to look at those and figure out where you kind of land on that spectrum, because even a few miles can make a big difference. You know, just a couple of miles or one side of a hill or another can mean that one place stays really, really hot and dry all summer, while a couple miles away, maybe they're just within the fog line and get a lot more cooler weather. So it's important to know where you are in relation to that and kind of know your little own microclimate so that you can, again, better pick the crops for your specific location. Hope that makes sense to folks. And I know, again, I'm going over this very sort of broadly, but there's a lot of information in the welcome email that was sent. Pretty much everything I'm going to go over is you can find much more info on it from that welcome email. So also keep in mind that a lot of these crops, a lot of different peppers or tomatoes or cucumbers, fruiting crops anyway, have sort of like this very particular kind of Goldilocks sun preference. So a little bit too much or a little bit not enough, and they won't fruit as much, or they'll start to fruit, but they won't fully develop. Those are pretty commonly tied to sun requirements. And one other thing to keep in mind is that if you have a really shady, say if you have a really sunny spot where you're trying to have your garden, it's possible to do some kind of shade if you want to try to cool that down. You know, you come up with some kind of simple shade structure, but it's a lot harder to bring sun to a naturally shady area unless you're going to go and chop some trees down, which is probably not worth it. But you know, everybody knows their situation best. So keep that in mind. You can always shade things. You can't always make things sunny. And then some other things to consider with what to plant when, if you're planting from seed or starts. That's a huge one that I would definitely, I'm not going to get into it a whole lot, but recommend everybody considers that and looks into it, because if you're starting from seeds, it's going to push your planting time earlier in the year, as opposed to if you're getting starts, they're already ready to go. So another thing to consider with kind of planting seeds versus starts is that if you have the ability to plant indoors, it's a lot easier, or even just start your seeds indoors, it's a lot easier to control that climate than outdoors. So you'll have much better yields if you can find any little space inside to start your seeds and then transplant them outside. But all of these calendars, all this information you can find in great detail just from that email. So yeah, remember to check your planting calendars, or also known as planting guides, for your specific area. Right now, June, you can kind of plant almost anything, anything fruiting anyway, and you can either start from seeds or starts, and you'll still have a good yield if you have decent soil and all. So beans, squash, tomatoes, anything fruiting. Curious if anybody knows or has input on what are some things you wouldn't want to plant right now. I don't know if anybody, I can actually see my chat box. So maybe we'll just leave that as an open question. Some things you wouldn't want to plant right now are cooler crops, or what are known as cooler crops. So things like leafy greens, in particular, lettuce, rooting vegetables, non-fruiting crops typically like cooler temperatures. And that's a very general statement, but it's not to say you can't plant lettuce here and now. Again, if you have a garden, or if you have a space where it's nice and shady, you could probably plant lettuce here and now and have great success. It's all about the specific location. Remembering your residents, within the bigger kind of microclimate, and then also your specific little site at home where you're going to end up planting, and what kind of sun or temperatures it gets. So my favorites have always been to just do leafy greens and herbs, because they're super easy. There's a whole bunch of different kinds. They're really, really hardy, and you can grow them in just about anything. Tiny little planters, raised beds, right in the ground. They grow really quick, and you can just keep harvesting all throughout the year, depending on what you're growing. So I always highly recommend just like salad greens or herbs for anybody who's kind of beginning. They're not as demanding, on fertilizers. They're a lot more forgiving, but they still require, some basic kind of care and attention. And just remember, most leafy greens don't like the heat. They don't like direct sun in the middle of the summer for very long at all. You'll have some issues if they do end up getting exposed for many days at a time throughout the summer. So always keep that in mind. I'm curious if there is any questions, Jess, right now, or anything that I can go over, anything particular.
Hey, Seuss, this is Christina, and I'm monitoring I've been monitoring the group chat, and it's going great. Folks are really excited to offer their input, and lots of folks already kind of starting to share the details of their gardening journeys, which is really exciting and makes me feel like we'll have a lot to talk about in those small breakout groups. But a couple of things were added in relation to your question that you posed to the group. What do you not want to grow right now? So we received an answer. Cold weather crops such as spinach might not be good right now. And then we had a question posed on that topic, and maybe you know, maybe someone in the group knows, are peas cooler crops? Are they considered cooler crops?
You know, right now, I looked at the calendar, and right now is the time to start planting. Well, at least beans anyway. Peas, I don't know. Maybe somebody knows the difference if there is one. Anybody in the group have any experience growing peas? And are they summer, warmer crop, or cooler crop?
Okay, I'll keep an eye on that chat to see if anybody has an answer. And it seems like peas tend to dry out quickly. Probably better to plant them in the fall, is the answer we're getting.
Okay.
Interesting. We did in the beginning get a couple of questions related to pests and some looking for tips to better control those issues. We have someone saying that they have issues with gophers, deer, and other small pests.
Okay. We're going to get into pests in just a little bit here. That's actually going to be the second part here, the presentation, when we talk about some of the most common challenges that people reported in the survey. But I just wanted to give one more minute here to see if anybody had any questions that we could all kind of discuss on timing, or specific, calendars or any other crops that people are wondering. So if anybody has any questions on that here and now, I think I'd like to give that opportunity, because we do have some time before we will talk about pests. I promise. Not all of them, too many, but if anybody has any further input or questions on what to plant when.
Let's see. I'm looking through the chat now. Yeah, this is a great question here. Someone just asked any crops that grow together, that grow well together. So crops that like growing in close proximity to one another.
That is a really good question. Let's see. Does anybody in the group have any recommendations? Okay, so I can tell you right now, for my particular area, which is in the peninsula here, so what's known as the more hot southern area of San Mateo County, June, some of the crops that do well from either starts or transplants, I should say, transplants or seeds, are beans, runner beans, snap beans, beet, corn, cucumber, eggplant, melon, okra, pepper, radish, tomatoes, summer squash, winter squash, Swiss chard. I think that's kind of like a slightly more heat tolerant leafy green. Yeah, so lots and lots of fruiting plants. Only a couple of salad things or leafy greens like the chard. And again, this is just a recommendation. It just means that that's what you're likely to have the most success with. It doesn't mean you can't grow cooler crops. It all depends on your specific kind of climate and garden area. So
we're getting lots of suggestions here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, someone is saying corn, squash, beans, or sunflowers. Those are considered sister crops planted together by indigenous peoples. And also a couple of people have mentioned to look up or Google or search companion planting, and that should give you some good resources for what crops to plant together and also what crops to not plant together.
Very cool. Companion planting. I really like that.
Cool.
Well, thank you to those folks who shared that. That is a good place for everybody to start, or anybody who is looking into that. But companion planting alone sounds like it could be a whole discussion topic for a future meeting.
Absolutely. And we're getting lots of resource suggestions here, so we can be sure to share those out later as well.
Carrots love tomatoes.
That's
great.
Great title.
Yeah. Cool. So keep those recommendations and just input coming in, because remember the chat is being recorded, so it'll be a great resource for everybody to look back to. And at some point, we'll probably sort of break that down and put it into this digital edible library that we're talking about here. So definitely keep those coming and really, really appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. Sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
Jesus.
No problem.
I was anticipating that you're probably getting into the next discussion topic. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you mind if I quickly interrupt to have the participants take a very short poll?
Sure.
Would that be okay? Okay, great.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. So this poll, it's really designed to help us better understand what everybody's current gardening level is at, and it'll help us better structure future meetings. It will just take a few minutes, and I know that probably a handful of you have already provided some input, but we're hoping to capture just a little bit more input here today since we've got 60 participants. So, like I said, very short, will only take a couple minutes, and you should see that launch on your screen in just a second here. Okay. And we really appreciate your feedback, folks.
I have a question. Could you change your survey so we can pick more than one thing?
Unfortunately, the survey is kind of designed this way.
It's hard to answer because more than one answer applies, just saying. But that's okay. I'll do my best.
That's really, really helpful to know. So thank you for sharing that.
क्वेश्चन कसं विचारायचं?
Just a reminder to everyone, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone.
Hi, I have a question. Can you ask?
Hello, yes.
Hello. I'm Anu, and I want to ask someone that the mangoes can be planted in that season. Hi.
Hi, can you repeat that? Planting what?
I'm trying to plant mangoes in our backyard. Can we plant?
I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen a mango tree out here. I think they're much more tropical and like a lot more humidity and just a lot more heat than we have to offer. But I don't know, has anybody seen or heard of any mango farm or anyone successfully growing mangoes in the Bay Area?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey,
oh, someone?
Hey, folks.
Yeah, I do.
So I'm so sorry to interrupt. Just in the interest of kind of keeping this a little bit structured, because there are so many folks on here and a couple of voices trying to speak over one another. If we could just keep our mics muted during this portion here, we will prompt folks to get into smaller breakout groups, and then we will be able to have these live discussions using our microphones. In the meantime, just please type everything into that chat box. And I'm so sorry to ask everyone to do that, but with 60 folks, there's voices speaking over one another. So just to keep that a little bit structured. Thank you so much. Okay, and looks like the polling is complete. So I'm gonna hand that, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Jesus, to continue with your presentation.
All right. Thanks everybody for your input there with the poll. So, as promised, we're going to go over some of the most common challenges. And again, this will still be pretty broad, but I think it'll at least help for any folks who kind of want to get an idea of some of the options, at least help you kind of set you on a certain path. And again, remember, if you have specific questions, just like Christina mentioned, you can save those and we can discuss them once we break out into smaller groups and can facilitate conversations a little bit easier without people, necessarily talking over each other. So some of the most common challenges, and this is again based on the survey that we sent out, one of them was how much to water. It's a really, really common one, whether you overwater or underwater. So just to say, just to start with, you probably don't need to water every day. And if you're a beginning kind of gardener, you might be doing it in an effort to make sure your plants always has water, but it's not necessary. It's going to depend, again, on your specific climate, how much heat or sun your garden gets. But you really only want to water if the soil is dry under an inch or two. So the best way is to actually get in there and feel your soil, not just by looking at the soil or not just by touching it on the very surface. You want to kind of like dig your fingers in just a little bit. If you can put your fingers in a couple inches and feel moisture, then your plant's probably fine because its roots are going to be nice and moist. If you can dig your fingers in, or you can't because it's so dry and compact, hard, then chances are you need to water. So again, it'll depend a lot on your garden type, whether you have, plants in the ground or in a container or a raised bed. Containers will tend to dry up more quickly.
Just a reminder, please mute your mics. Thank you.
So yeah, it's going to depend on your specific garden or plant, whether it's in the ground or container, but that's a just nice, easy rule of thumb is to just kind of like feel below the surface and see if there's moisture there. And then once you do that on a regular basis and you kind of get the feel or the pattern for how quickly the water dries up or is absorbed, you'll kind of like start to learn, every third day or twice a week, or maybe it is really hot and sunny and you need to do it like every other day. So it definitely takes some time. It is not one rule for every garden or plant to say water this much per square foot or anything like that. And with that in mind, really, I think it's important to be observers in this all. It's the most important skill that you can have in gardening, I think. You want to notice how your plant looks and feels when it's happy and when it's thriving, and kind of like capture that. You got to take a picture. I think that'd be great. Take a picture when you first get your plant or when you first transplant it, and you can tell it's just like really springy and alive, and then check it every day, check it twice a day or 3 times a day, even if it's just quickly like glancing at it. It takes practice and just time spent observing whatever it is that you're growing, and you'll start to kind of pick up on the cues in your plants and garden telling you it's thirsty. So some of the things you want to look out for are the shape and posture of the leaves. Pretty much no matter what you're growing, almost any plant will visually change when it's thirsty, when it needs water. The leaves will get kind of droopy. The whole plant might kind of like be a little bit limp. And if you go to feel it, you can move the leaves around and they won't spring right back. They'll just kind of stay droopy versus nice and upright or looking for the sun. So the best technique is to just kind of observe your plant on a regular basis, observe your garden, go in there, check it more than once a day. Obviously, really, really go out there and check it if it gets a lot of sun, if it's a really hot day, keep an extra close eye on it. But it's really gonna, how much to water is really gonna depend on your specific garden and the types of things that you're growing. So the best thing I can tell you is to just be observant. And this will only take a little while. I promise you'll start to notice the differences in your plant when it's doing great or when it's maybe a little thirsty. And then one thing is, obviously, if the soil is wet, don't water it again, especially if it's wet right at the surface. You don't want to keep watering every day just because your plant needs water every day. It probably doesn't. So just do that quick check the soil just underneath a couple inches. If it still feels dry down there, then add some water. I hope that's clear. And again, if you're not familiar with, what a thirsty plant or garden might look like, then I really recommend taking pictures 2 or 3 times a day. And then you can just kind of like compare them, like you water one day or when you first plant something, and again, it's doing great. You kind of have that baseline. Take a couple pictures a day for the next few days that you don't water, and you can watch how your plant in your garden actually changes, and you'll notice that it starts to physically kind of droop, and you water some more, and within hours or a day, it'll spring back up. So I hope that kind of helps to answer that really common question that I know a lot of us have trouble with. And if not, if anybody has any other input, just please remember to submit everything and anything, any thoughts or questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get to them. So the next most common topic had to do with pests. And this is just a very real and kind of unavoidable challenge for any home gardener, because for pretty much every food that we grow and love to eat, there's like 1,000 critters that also love to eat it. So there's everything from like insects and bugs to bacteria and fungus that all thrive in our garden, but we don't really, they don't really want them there. We want a nice clean garden for us to consume. So going over some of the most common ones, let's see. So one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these are very specific to whatever you're growing. So I'm just going to go over some of the most common ones, and just a few of the solutions that I personally have tried that have worked for me, and a couple that I looked up that maybe I've never tried, but seem to work for a lot of folks. But I encourage anyone with a particular pest problem that I don't go over here and now to bring it up in your group, because chances are someone else has dealt with it already and is more than willing to share and help. So probably one of the top pests are aphids. I think everybody here has seen or dealt with aphid problems. Even if you're not a gardener, sometimes if you buy from like farmers markets, or really anywhere, there's a chance that you might have, if it's organic, that it might have some aphids on it. So aphids, really common, tons of different plants. Some of the most common, and again, I'm always lead more towards a natural treatment method. So probably a lot of folks know that ladybugs love to eat aphids. So if you have an outdoor garden, that's a really common and relatively easy solution, although it's not a foolproof solution. You can get ladybugs, you can put them out there, you can sprinkle them over several days like they recommend, but they can all just fly away and go somewhere else. So that's one option, but it shouldn't be relied on as just a single option to take care of aphids. I think one really effective treatment is to get in there with a type of spray. Now, what I've used before is you pretty much take some garlic, onion, and cayenne, and you put it in a blender, and then you sort of strain it with a cheesecloth or something, put that in a spray bottle, and that's like a nice, easy spray that you can throw on just about anything. It's all obviously like totally safe, and it smells great. So spraying that on just about anything is going to be really effective. But the thing to remember and to be really diligent about with those kind of treatments is that you have to be diligent and thorough. So spraying all sides of the leaves. And I know it's time consuming, but those little guys will move. If you just kind of like do a quick spray over everything, they'll hide underneath, or they'll start moving somewhere where they're not exposed. So try getting the tops and the bottoms of all the leaves. Do it on a regular basis, back-to-back days. It'll definitely make a huge difference versus just spraying every now and again when you remember to. Also, there's neem oil is really common, or even just like a solution of soapy water I know has worked for a lot of folks. One that actually worked for me, I haven't done it in a while, but I heard about it or read about it and tried it out, and it did work. But this only works if you're already growing like tomatoes. So you take all the leaves, maybe if you're trimming a tomato plant, you take a lot of the leaves and you, again, just blend those, strain them, and then you use that solution to spray on things. And I guess tomatoes have some sort of like natural pesticide or something that aphids don't like. And that works really well. It's super natural. And if you're already pruning your tomato plant, well, then it gives you something to do with all those cuttings. So one other thing to keep in mind with aphids is that the best solution or the best approach is to be preventative about getting them. So I would highly recommend, and I've learned this over the years, to plant your own seeds if you can, because then you have a lot more control of the environment, where your plants have been, what they've been exposed to. If you don't have that opportunity, then, and you're buying like little 6-pack starts, or really buying anything that could potentially have aphids, whether you see them or not, it's a good idea to do some kind of like dip. So you kind of take your plant, and as you're going to go plant it in your garden or in your container or whatnot, you can look up a solution. I haven't done it in a while, but I think it's something just like mild detergent solution, and maybe some kind of oil, or you can even try this same garlic, onion, cayenne, and you sort of dip just the foliage, just the leaves of whatever you're planting in that before you transplant. And that sort of helps to fight back anything before you introduce it to your garden. So if you're proactive about that, being preventative in the beginning, you'll have a lot more success in keeping aphids out or fighting them off if you do end up getting them, because once they get in there and get in everything, it's really tough, or it can be. So aphids, hope that helps. If anybody else has any other recommendations, please submit them. Powdery mildew is another really common one, especially in the summer, especially on like big, broader leaf crops, squash and pumpkins and whatnot that have these big, broad leaves that can actually collect dew. So it's a type of fungus, I believe, and it's caused by moisture usually, or excessive moisture. So the first thing you want to do with anything like this is confirm that it's actually powdery mildew. And there's a bunch of resources online that'll help you do that before you just go and try to treat for something. You want to like look up some pictures and make sure that it correlates with what you are seeing in your garden. Some of the common treatments, again, saying really just as natural or simple as possible, are baking soda and vegetable or neem oil and a little tiny bit of soap. Make that into a spray. Also, I read about a milk solution, like a 10-to-1 milk solution, and people, say that really is pretty effective, as well as a vinegar solution. So all those will work and help, but again, it's about being diligent with spraying everywhere, and then if there's any leaves that are just badly infected, you can cut those off and remove them. And be careful when you remove them. Try to, not just like chuck them around, because those little spores will end up everywhere. And I mean, they're still going to end up everywhere. We're trying to reduce that spread. So cut them, put them in a paper bag, compost them, whatever. And then whatever you have left, treat it regularly. And remember to get both sides of leaves. I know it's a lot of work, but it's what it really takes to be effective at fighting this back and ultimately removing it. So powdery mildew. And again, just like make sure, confirm that that's what you have, because there's a lot of other things that might look like powdery mildew and could actually be some other kind of disease or even like a deficiency in the plant's nutrient requirements. So get familiar with what you have out there as far as pest problems and what you're trying to fight back, and make sure that you're your enemy, I guess. So some other common pests that people had issues with are bigger things like raccoons, rodents, birds. I know even in the chat, some folks mentioned deer. I personally don't have a lot of experience with fighting those back, other than this one rat that used to climb up onto the 3rd floor balcony and eat all my lettuce at night, and then it would make its way back down the gutter and out of there. So that was easy enough to just like figure out it's coming in the gutter, and you plug the gutter, or I plugged the gutter, and that was it. So it's very easy compared to like when you have a garden out in a raised bed or anything like that. But what I would recommend, and I think is easy and affordable, is to, if you have any issues like that, build a sort of chicken wire cage to kind of protect whatever fruits or whatever crops you're growing. And this could be as simple or as elaborate as you want to get. If you have deer, it might take a little bit more, maybe putting in some posts to kind of encompass the whole garden. One other really fun solution that, again, I've never tried, but I know a few people who swear by it, and I kind of really want to try it, even just for fun, are these motion sensor like sprinklers. So I guess you like hook your hose up to them, and they got a little motion sensor in them. And whenever something big enough, like a raccoon or deer or whatever comes by, it'll like spray the pest. It'll spray them and scare them away. And I know people who like love them, and they sound really fun. Plus it's like harmless, you know, it's just, you're just spraying and shooing the critters away. And I guess you can kind of like daisy chain them. So you can, you know, have one and then it runs to another one. And then so you can really protect, if you have a big garden, can really do that. Yeah. And those are kind of, you know, some of my recommendations on it, but I'm really curious to look back at the chat here and see what other folks think.
Yeah. Hey, Seuss, I've been going through those. Folks are sharing lots of great tips. There's so many, we can't get to them all here now, but there are a couple of big questions that seem to be popping out. So in terms of the cayenne spray that you recommended and some other folks backed and said, that's great, I use that too. Are there any crops that you would not want to spray that on?
Ooh, I don't know. I used to spray it on everything, but again, I only really grew things like mostly leafy greens and tomatoes and some fruits, but I sprayed it pretty liberally on everything and never noticed any side effects. But I'm curious. It's a really good question. It seems natural enough that it wouldn't hurt any plant. And if you just keep it really simple go ahead.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt. I had two, I'm watching two responses coming in that folks are sharing a succulent like plant or a cacti would not be good for that. It'll burn it. That's interesting. Cool. Okay. And then someone was asking if you could share, is there a particular ratio for the ingredients that you put in that spray?
I think I always did like a couple cloves of garlic, and then just like a chunk of onion. I'm sure there is a very specific recipe. I honestly, I had it written on my spray bottle, and it was always just diluted to 1 liter, and it did great. But I think if you just Google cayenne, onion, garlic spray, it'll come up with like 100 recipes, and you can pick one and try it, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't.
There's also some recommendations for coyote urine. Apparently,
oh yes,
yeah, rats don't like it. Someone's asking, how about gophers? Would that deter gophers? Does anybody know?
Good question. I've heard of coyote or just urea in general as a good deterrent, yeah, for things, but I've only ever heard it being used on lawns, like when raccoons, I don't know if anybody's experienced, like raccoons coming in and they'll like dig up your lawn to get at the worms underneath or whatever's underneath there. Because I don't know about spraying coyote pee on my salad greens. I mean, I know you can wash it all off, but personally, I'd rather just stick with cayenne and onion.
Right. Yeah. Someone also shared that vinegar could potentially be a good herbicide, but be careful using that for bugs. I don't know if anybody has input for that.
Yeah, I did read that a vinegar solution, and it's a very weak solution. I think it's only a couple tablespoons per liter, so is pretty effective. And well, I guess that would be more for a fungus, like powdery mildew. But yeah, I haven't read as that being, or you know what, I think for like worms and caterpillars, I think that's also pretty effective. but yeah, I know people use it for sure. It's just kind of figuring out what works best for what you're growing. Like with so many of these things, there isn't a single solution that applies across the board to everything, or else we would all already know it. It's just what works for your particular needs.
Right, right. Lots of great suggestions for the pest issue. There was also some folks were discussing dry and clay soil and some potential solutions for that. A couple of things came in, and you can add to this, Jesus, if you have something. Someone was suggesting adding organic matter, and adding gypsum can also help.
Help with
dry or clay-like soil.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty big conversation, the structure or makeup of your soil. And I'm really excited people are getting in there. And I think it'll just be better to have that be sort of one of the small group conversations, because we can get really carried away talking about soil.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think that it would be a great time to pivot to those smaller group discussions, because the questions and comments are flooding in. So be exciting to get to chat in those smaller groups.
Sounds good.
Okay, so there should be a note that comes up on everyone's screen to accept the invitation to join your breakout room. They're going to be relatively small groups, maybe about 5 people each, but I think that'll be great for some more discussion in depth.
And for those of us who have just returned from a breakout group, we were just having a really rich discussion about follow-up resources and intimidation factors, and how to start simply, how to deal with weeds. And so we talked about all these things, and there seems to be an interest in some kind of follow-up support. I know Rebecca was talking about, well, is there somebody that I can, reach out to, maybe that's nearby to me, or maybe an expert? So I don't want to hijack the conversation, but it did seem to me in the group I was in that there's an interest to have access to other folks to continue on the journey. So I'd like to kind of talk with the people that I lead this program with on how we can arrange for that and continue to support people.
That's great, Ivana. I'm glad you brought that up. My group was having a similar conversation, and I let them know that we will definitely be reconvening about that and discussing that further to try to figure out what the best way to do that would be. And I got some good feedback for that as well from my group.
I did as well. This is Sarah, and we had some participants who were from the cooler coastal areas and some who were from the sunnier bayside areas. And so there was a suggestion to maybe group people by their geography or by their zone. So if you have questions about what grows better on the cooler coastal areas, then you can join that group. We also had a lot of questions about pruning and thinning out fruits on fruit trees, specifically citrus trees, and a lot of strawberry questions about daytime and nighttime visitors, and insects versus larger thieves. We have a possible possum or raccoon problem, so that was fun to listen to. And rosemary came up in our conversation, if anyone knows about what varietals of rosemary are the best for cooking. And I certainly want to know the answer to that one too.
In our group, we talked a lot about the struggles of wanting to utilize the garden year-round, and looking for support in starting gardening that's also happening in the fall, not just in one specific season. Another topic that was brought up was the wind factor, how to troubleshoot wind if you're going to be outside. And it sounds like one solution was a greenhouse, like a small greenhouse, but if anyone has other solutions of how to combat wind. And our final topic that I feel like we spent a lot of time on and didn't really come up with steadfast solutions was about the clay soil, how to troubleshoot clay soil, make sure it's a useful ecosystem for plants.
All are very, very interesting and definitely worthwhile topics. I'm just curious here in the last few minutes that we have before wrapping this first meeting up, if anyone brought up or talked about an article that was sent out in the welcome email regarding victory gardens from World War II. Anybody remember or happen to like open or read that? It's really, really interesting. Oh, here, I'll give everybody a minute or so if anybody has thoughts on that. I'm really curious what people took away from that or how they feel about that relating to the situation now.
Yeah, I think it was an amazing read. Thanks for the forward. It was just amazing that how a war or a pandemic like this is forcing all of us to think, going back to your roots, doing simple stuff is actually very energizing, right? Though I'm not a gardener right now, but I'm at least thinking about it, which I would not have done. So it was very inspiring for sure. That article was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It was really, really refreshing and so many reasons to grow your own food, right? I mean, obviously you're buying less food, you're reducing your carbon footprint, but then it's also very nurturing to have that connection with the earth and to just go back. I know the pressures are different from obviously wartime and now, but it has prompted a very similar response in our communities, and I think in a lot of us, certainly most of us here today anyway, I would imagine. It's great to kind of see that in everybody and going back to the basics and practicing more sustainable behaviors. I think it's really one of the most inspirational and the things that I'm really trying to hold on to in this whole challenging time that we're all kind of going through is the fact that, we're all to some degree, whether we know it or not, kind of localizing in a lot of different ways and reconnecting with one another and with our food, with the earth. So, yeah, I really appreciate everybody being here today and just want to remind everyone that we have every intention to make this an ongoing group, and we'll try our best to address some of the topics and different themes that everybody brought up today in future meetings. But thank you so much for making this a successful first meeting. And yeah, if we have a few minutes left, if anybody has any final questions or thoughts or comments, you can either put them in the chat box, or I think, we have time to just take any comments verbally. What do you think, Jess?
This is Christina here. I think that's a great idea.
Christina.
We have a couple minutes
Sorry.
left. Great idea. No worries at all. And I'm just going to ask folks to very quickly just take one more last poll, just so we can collect some input on how this meeting went for you guys and how we can improve for next time. So I'm going to launch that now. It'll be very quick, I promise. And we really appreciate your input. So you should see that on your screen now. And then afterwards, we can take a couple final questions. Okay, awesome. Looks like we're just about done with the poll. Let's see, we're just about at time too. So I don't know, does anybody have any final burning questions that they want to ask before we sign off? Will we get this recording? Great question. Yes, this is being recorded and we will share that out after the meeting? Thank you for asking.
Just give a shout out. You can ask Master Gardeners any kind of question about anything, and they will try to get an answer to you. You can call them or email them.
Thank you, Naomi. Okay. Are we able to join future meetings if there are any? Yes, absolutely. And let's see, Jesus, do we have any plans for that in the works already, or is that something that we're still
Not right
figuring
now,
out?
but we will absolutely be holding future meetings. It's just not determined yet as far as when. Will probably be some follow-up on the same email to kind of take a poll of what some topics everybody kind of wants to go over for the next meeting. But yes, we have every intention of this being an ongoing meeting.
That's perfect. Okay,
So
and
just stay tuned. We will send that info out, and then also let you know when we put together that digital library.
Great. Okay, and we're just over time, so this feels like a good place to wrap up. And if there's any final comments that you want to add, Jesus, the floor is yours.
No, I just want to say thanks again to everybody for being open and receptive to this, this group. It's really nice to see everybody here interested and willing to kind of have this different approach to learning in a collaborative effort. So thank you all very much, and yeah, happy gardening. Look forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you all.